Next, we can think about aggregate supply, which is the other arm of demand in the ADS model. When you think about aggregate supply, the most important aspect that differentiate, of course, the fact that this is a production and that is consumption, but is the idea also that the time horizon matters, or the changes in time horizon changes the behavior of the businesses. So if you think about short run, for a short duration, or if you think about long run, the shape of the aggregate supply curve is different. So if you take an example, say if prices go up, right? Let's assume that there is 8% rise in prices of the product, and the wages of the people or salary of the people goes up only by 2%, just making up numbers. Then the profits of the businesses will be higher, and if profits are higher, they would supply more, right? And so you can straight away see that when prices are higher, supply will be higher, and you can see that there is an upward sloping supply curve. Supply, GDP, is production and price. But in the long run, that won't happen. In the long run, if the prices are higher by 8%, the workers are going to renegotiate their contracts and say, hey, businesses are making 8% more, and we are a part of this business. And so in a perfectly competitive labor market, the 8% rise would also happen to the input cost or wages. In this case, the profits will have no impact. Profits won't be impacted at all, because any rise in the price that the businesses are getting from selling their product is being passed on to the workers, and as a result there is no impact on the profit. And if there is no impact on the profit, the supply will also not be reacting to that, right? And hence you see that no matter what is a price in the long run, the production will be what it is at one particular point. Also, the other idea that one can think about is that since you're talking of long run, in the long run, what we produce is a function of the resources we have, right? So, right from Econ 101, the first class, one can keep this idea in mind that, resources is which is land, labor, and capital, is what is needed to produce anything, right? And so there is always a limited amount of resources, and hence there is always a fixed amount of output that we can produce, right? And that's what we are referring to as YF, to represents full employment output. So full employment is just not related to the people, but employment of all the resources together, right? And so that is a fixed amount. So no matter what is the price that is there in the economy, in the long run, how much you produce will be a function of resources you have. And then this can straight away build on to the forces that affects aggregate supply or shift aggregate supply. The input cost, classic case, if the cost of production is higher, then aggregate supply will be shifting to the left, or it will be lower, because now it's less profitable. And if there is tax subsidies or subsidies that is given by the government, which is kind of a benefit that comes to the businesses, the profitability will be higher and aggregate supply will be higher, which is going to be represented by a shift to the right, correct? And so in increase of aggregate supply will be represented by a rightward shift of aggregate supply. When you think about the long run aggregate supply, again we go back to the same logic, right? What affects long run? The resources, right? And so as long as resources, which is land, labor, and capital, if we change that, if we have more labor or more capital or more efficient way to use land, labor, and capital, then that will allow us to increase our capacity to produce. We may produce more or we may not produce more, but it will allow us to increase in our productive capacities. Then you have long run factors like climate change and things like that also affects our ability to produce output,